Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend. Welcome to Fanfiction World with another fiction. What if Bakugo failed in love? Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. If you more want video like this, now let's get into the fanfic. Katsuki Bakugo placed his hand in Izuku Midoriya's shoulder, watching it burn as the teenager trembled. Why the fuck do you want to be a pro hero with such a villain quirk? You can't even defend yourself without killing us, can you? Katsuki smirked. He knew Izuku wasn't going to fight back physically. Just get out of our way and stop dreaming about the impossible, you loser. Katsuki felt a wave of irritation as he watched Izuku's sad expression. Izuku Midoriya lowered his head as he heard his classmate speak. His body shook slightly as he wasn't sure what to do or even think. He didn't ask for the quirk he had. He was just born with it. He could do good things with it, right? Kachin, he says in almost a mumble as he felt tears starting to form in his eyes. I can do it. I can be a hero. Just give me a chance, he said, as he forced a smile and looked up at Katsuki Bakugo. He reached to touch him, but quickly pulled his own hand back and held it against his chest. Izuku felt the tears fall down his cheeks. I can do it. I'll be a hero one day regardless of my quirk. He spoke trying to sound confident, even if all the bullying was definitely getting to him. Good lord, you're already crying like a pathetic weakling. Just realize your dream is never coming, Deku. There is no way a hero would be allowed to have such destructive power. Katsuki stared at Deku as he cried, feeling disgust. Why did he have to be so ridiculous? He turned around and went on to leave the classroom before speaking up. Actually, there is a way a guy like you with such a terrible quirk would be a hero. He spoke, without turning around. Just dive off the roof and hope that in your next life, you will have a good quirk. Katsuki laughed, and relished the way his gang joined him. Izuku quickly wiped his tears when Katsuki mentioned it, but the tears wouldn't stop falling anyway. You're wrong. I can be a hero, he said as he looked away. He couldn't bring himself to look at Katsuki. He felt so small by the way the others looked at him. Izuku looked over at Katsuki as his eyes widened a bit as his words. He froze for a couple of moments as he just stared at Katsuki's back. He felt his legs go weak under him as he fell to his knees. He was careful not to touch the floor as he felt more tears roll down his eyes. How could you? How could you say that, Kachin? He whispers, not intending for the blonde to hear him. He covered his face with his hands as he cried for a couple of minutes. Izuku stood and stumbled a bit. He laid his hand on his own desk, and he always fell over when it broke into pieces under his hand. He quickly caught himself as he slowly walked out the classroom. Izuku didn't want to be there anymore. He just couldn't. He couldn't let those words get to his head. He was determined to be a hero. Izuku just hoped it would be possible. Katsuki stared at Deku's empty seat. The loser never skipped school, so this was strange. He wondered, for a second, if Deku had finally decided to listen to him and jumped off the roof. But he decided to push that theory aside, his heartbeat stopping for a second for no good reason. Deku's mom maybe gave him a break after he cried to her for having the worst quirk in history. Yeah, that was what definitely happened. As he made his mind about it, the teacher said hi to the class and spoke up. Midoriya Izuku is leaving our class due to an offer he got from a prestigious Uses Hero Academia. Although it is strange that he was the one who got it. The teacher paused as he watched his students smirking at his words, just like they always did when he spoke about that problematic student. But nonetheless, I guess we should wish him a happy trip. His mother asked us to sign this t-shirt for him as a memory. The teacher showed them a white shirt. You can write on it as much as you want. He smiled, although not without a hint of malice. When Izuku got the offer, he didn't hesitate to take it. Yes, UO was one of the best schools around, but he didn't think it was a good idea to continue there. His mother was fairly hesitant to allow such a move, but she didn't protest, seeing how upset he seemed when he got home. Izuku was walking around his room as he finished packing up a few of his things. Well, the things he needed to move to the US. Izuku looked over when his mother walked in the room holding a bag. "Here, Izuku, I got this from your teacher," his mother said as she walked over to him. She handed him the bag. "Thank you," Izuku says with a forced smile and takes the bag, being very careful. She left him alone to finish packing her own things. Izuku sat down on his bed as he took out the shirt that was inside, being very careful. His green eyes made their ways around the shirt. Izuku gulped as he read a few of the things his classmates wrote. Some were fairly good, but some were obviously not. He wanted to destroy the shirt, but he also couldn't bring himself to. "I won't let this bring me down. I'll prove everyone wrong," he said as he wiped his tears and stood. He tossed the shirt on the bed as he went back to packing his things. He would be a hero anyways. Years went by and Izuku was asked to return to Japan to help the heroes. He was now 18. He wasn't sure how his quirk would help with anything, but they wouldn't leave him alone, so he agreed. The last thing he wanted to do was return to Japan and possibly run into his old classmates. He had gotten better at controlling his quirk and even learned a lot while he was away, but words still haunted his mind. Izuku looked at himself in the mirror of the hotel room that was rented out for him. He has no intentions on staying in Japan. He had no reason to stay in Japan. He splashed some cold water on his face before he got ready to head out. Izuku tried his best to avoid people on his way to the place he was told to meet. He gently rubbed his arm as he got lost in his thoughts a couple times. He only grew more and more nervous the closer he got. He wasn't sure what to do. He couldn't be that useful, could he? He looked down at his hands before he lifted his head to see all the heroes. He knew all the heroes. "Stay calm, Izuku Midoriya. Don't panic," he thought to himself as he took a deep breath. He just stood off to the side to not make too much contact with others. Izuku startled at the sound of honking, realizing his taxi had arrived. He got inside. He knew he was about to reunite with Japan's most prestigious pro heroes by going to the meeting where they would decide what to do with world menace Shigaraki Tamura. "We need someone with a lethal quirk to deal with this threat," Izuku remembered hearing from his boss. Izuku shook his head as he pushed away from the wall. He couldn't get lost in his thoughts now. He had to be serious. He was called to do a very important mission, and he wouldn't get distracted. Izuku looked around to see if he could see any familiar faces just out of curiosity. When he spotted a specific blonde, he felt his body tense and he froze. He quickly looked away from him as he moved to get lost a bit in the crowd between other heroes, but also being careful. He had his hands against his own body, so he wouldn't accidentally touch anyone. He tried not to worry too much, knowing they probably wouldn't be assigned together, or even in the same group. Izuku lowered his head to try and not make his face visible either. He just had to get this job over with, and then he could leave Japan after a couple days. It's what's best. Izuku chose to focus on the pro hero's words. He had to know what was the plan, and so he completely managed to ignore the blonde's curious eyes as he stared at All Might, who went on to explain that they were going to fight the League of Villains and Shigaraki by fighting them separately. The task of fighting Shigaraki will be fulfilled by pro hero Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo, along with Aizawa for support as well as Monoma, the retired pro hero announced. Katsuki was startled upon hearing that familiar name. There was no way Deku had actually ignored all the bullying and just became a pro hero. His eyes widened as he scanned around the room, until he found the iconic set of freckles. There he was, Izuku Midoriya, the boy to who Katsuki had told him to kill himself when they were both 15 years old. How come he had never heard of Deku being a pro hero? Maybe he was an underground hero. Maybe he never met success. To this day, Katsuki still didn't know how a hero could have such a devastating quirk and still save lives. Deku was essentially quirkless, unless he used his power carefully not to kill and only destroy. Katsuki pulled out his phone. ignoring All Might's scolding look, and quickly Googled Izuku Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya, age 18, the student who just graduated, and whose origins actually lie in Japan, debuted this year. As he kept exploring, articles talked about pro heroes Deku, charismatic and impossibly shy character, and how wonderful he was for stopping highly skilled villains with a big bounty on their heads. Katsuki suddenly remembered the way the teacher had announced Izuku's departure for A Hero Academia. He just had assumed the nerd had dropped out, or just plainly failed. Now, he knew he was wrong. He knew he had screwed up. Izuku felt as if he had just been punched in the face when he heard who'd he be partnered with. He wasn't against Aizawa or Monoma. He wasn't even against Katsuki. But the memories definitely haunted him. He closed his eyes tightly as he lowered his head. He wanted to hide from Katsuki specifically, but he knew that there was probably a reason they were partnered up. He opened his eyes and looked over to see where he had seen the blonde before. He gulped nervously as he listened to All Might. He trusted All Might. He was still a big fan of him, so he would do his best to not let him down. He laid a hand on his chest as he took a deep breath. There was no reason for him to hide anymore. Everything was in the past. He should get over it. He needed to get over it, even if he did think he already had. He'd grow stronger if let it go and maybe patch things up. Before he went back, he began to take steps closer to where he had spotted Katsuki. Izuku only grew more nervous by each step, but he was determined to keep going. Once he stood next to Katsuki, he smiled at him, looking up slightly at their height difference. "Hey Kachin. Long time no see, right? Guess we're working together," he says, trying to sound cheerful. "Damn right we are. Never expected you to actually keep your word about being a hero, Deku." Katsuki watched Izuku's reaction as he flinched. "Let's just kill the bastard and show them what we are made of. Don't slow me down," he went on, without giving Izuku a chance to reply as he walked past him. Izuku couldn't help but flinch a bit at Katsuki's tone. He had partly forgotten how rough the other's voice could be, especially when he was serious. He opened his mouth to respond, but quickly shut it when Katsuki spoke again. He let out a sigh as he could tell he hadn't changed much. At least he wasn't as mean as he used to be. He looked away from Katsuki as he looked over at All Might once again. "Yeah, okay, we definitely got this," he says. He decided he wouldn't respond to the actually keeping his word and the "don't slow me down" comments. Izuku just needed to get the job done, and things would go back to the way they were. He would definitely try and stay on Katsuki's good side for the time being. Katsuki sighed as he waited in his seat. For some reason, All Might thought they should all get acquainted with each other and took them to a restaurant. Right now, it was only him and All Might, and they were waiting for the rest to arrive. It seemed like Izuku hadn't changed, not in the slightest. Still the same shy, self-conscious person he met when they were kids. He could tell by the way he carried himself, trying to hide from any attention, and still keeping that annoying stuttering he had back then. He was probably judging him harshly, Katsuki thought. After all, the nerd had managed to become a pro-hero despite being essentially quirkless most of the time. Since his power was too lethal to be used too frequently, he assumed. Katsuki knew that everything he had told to Izuku Midoriya was unfair. Even though he wasn't really sure of his skills in battle, he had been in the wrong. He clenched his fists, a familiar tension rising in his chest. "I know I was a jerk. He deserves an apology. But how the hell do I even start?" The idea of apologizing was foreign, almost repugnant to his pride. But the nagging guilt wouldn't let go. He knew he had been a too prideful, too cruel kid. Would apologizing even make a difference? If he were in Deku's place, he wouldn't really even think about the apology. After all, an apology would just be an insult at this point. Recognizing that what he did was wrong was one thing, but apologizing was entirely another matter, since actually saying sorry wouldn't change a thing about what he did. Words are so useless, he thought. they're just an empty, meaningless void. But Izuku did become a pro-hero. He was still climbing through the ranks, but even being on them was an achievement considering he had just graduated. He had just debuted at the start of the year, and was already taking care of highly looked-after villains. In a way, even though he didn't look the part at all, Izuku must have some strength in him, shouldn't he? Katsuki felt skeptical. Perhaps he didn't even care about Katsuki's harsh bullying. But even if he had moved on, it didn't change the fact that what he inflicted upon him was fucked up. If anyone knew about Katsuki's past, they would wonder how he did become a hero, without really questioning Deku. Actions speak louder than thoughts, Katsuki mused. Izuku had gone off to gather his thoughts and make a plan in his head before he went to meet up with Katsuki. He sighed as he leaned against the railing and just looked out to the city. I missed Japan, he mumbles to himself before he closes his eyes. He felt the light breeze against his skin and relaxed. Even if he didn't live in Japan anymore, people he cared for still did, and it was his first home after all. He would never reject an offer to help if he was one of the only people that could help. After a bit of thinking, he went back inside and went off to the meeting room. He opened the door and stepped inside. Sorry I took a while, he says as he tries his best to avoid looking at Katsuki. He walked over and took a seat across from him. Okay, about what we should do. He thought for a bit before he decided to speak again. He wanted to make sure to say the right thing to not piss Katsuki off. Of course, the obvious answer would be the element of surprise, but I'm sure he's probably on guard waiting for someone to attack. He trails off a bit as he looks down at his hands. In his mind, destroying would definitely be easier, but it wasn't the best option either. Anyone could easily get hurt, and he didn't want that to happen. He also didn't want to kill anyone by his actions either. He'd just be doing what he's been avoiding this entire time. My mind draws a blank, if I'm being honest, Bakugo-san. You can cause a distraction with your quirk, and I can attack first. Katsuki eyed Izuku before speaking. For once, the trained in me America pro-hero seemed to be self-confident. It's a good plan, but it probably would be strange if they only sent me, a recently debuted student, to fight Shigaraki. I would need someone else to fight with me. Monoma could copy my quirk, and we could fight as a distraction, as you use it to get close and get your hands on him. Poor bastard will vanish in a matter of seconds. He smirked. He won't know what hit him. Izuku nodded in agreement, as he still did his best to avoid eye contacts. Yeah, you're right about that. Monoma copying your quirk so you two can fight would be a great distraction. But try not to cause too much damage. He looks at Katsuki for a moment before he averted his eyes. I'll try and capture him at least. I don't want to actually kill him. If it comes down to it. Then I might, but I'll try and capture him. That's far easier said than done. From what I've seen from looking at what I was sent, and also things I've seen on my own, he's very powerful, obviously. I really don't think he'll go down without a fight. He said as he laid a hand on his chin and closed his eyes. He tries to imagine the building in his head, and what he could do to capture him. I can create some type of trap, but that wouldn't hold him for long, so I'd have to move fast. I can make the walls crumble on him, but that could cause a lot of damage for Shigaraki. He begins to ramble. A small habit he never got rid of. A lot of damage. For a bastard that killed an incredible amount of people and just destroyed a whole city. Deku, it seems like you haven't watched the news. The guy got multiple quirks, to the point some rubble won't do anything to him. Star and Stripe already died, although she used lasers on him. And he still managed to recover and heal up. This regeneration quirk he got makes him an annoying tank to battle with. You can't just capture him. You need to kill him, Deku. And we don't even know if your quirk will do anything to him. If the regeneration is so strong, he will just keep doing it. Until whatever time it takes for it to wear off. He got the same quirk as you, but even more potent since now he can mutate his body. Tying him up is impossible, since he will just destroy the ropes. You don't understand what we are dealing with, Deku. Katsuki felt angry. How dare Izuku insinuate anything else but to murder him? Of course he wouldn't want to get his hands dirty. Izuku dropped his hand down onto his lap and looked over at Katsuki. He wasn't going to admit he was wrong. Katsuki was definitely right. The best option would be to kill him if he could, but he didn't want to do that. He lowered his head and sighed. I don't know. I wasn't given much to work with. I get he's dangerous, but I really don't think I can bring myself to kill him. I'm sorry. He stood, as he bowed his head and laid his hands on the table, keeping his thumb off it just so he wouldn't destroy it. I told them I wouldn't kill him, and I stand by that. I don't want to risk it either. Eraserhead can come with me and erase his quirk, which in a way would make things easier. I'll protect him, so it should be all right. If it comes down to it, then we'll call you or Monoma to come help us, and other heroes too. He lifted his head to look at Katsuki as he gulped nervously. He felt like he was doing the opposite of what he was trying to do. But he shouldn't have been too surprised if he easily made the other mad. Are you fucking kidding us, Deku? You were brought from the USA because you were the most fit hero to kill Shigaraki. Since you can literally just touch him and he will die. And yet, you refuse to do your goddamn duty? Katsuki smashed his fist on the table, getting some looks from the rest of the customers. You're serious about this, aren't you? He sent a venomous look towards Izuku. Don't think bowing and apologizing will change shit. We need a different pro hero right now. Or maybe we will have to be enough. I certainly won't give up on my duty to this country. Not when everyone is counting on us to bring peace to Japan. Katsuki's face now was a tomato. Eraserhead can erase his fucking quirk. But he will still have super strength. This is ridiculous, he yelled. He felt the need to leave the restaurant, as he felt his forehead dripping with sweat, aware of the scared staring in the restaurant. Explain yourself, or I'm calling the commission on you. Izuku flinched when Katsuki smacked his fist on the table. He quickly took his hands off the table, knowing that if he felt any strong emotions his quirk would easily activate, even if not all his fingers were touching the table. I never killed anyone and I won't start now, he said as he looked Katsuki in the eyes, as his look and tone were now serious. We can have Eraserhead take away his quirks. As for his strength, that can easily be solved with other people's quirks as well. If you want me to kill him so bad, come grab my hand and force it, because I won't do it. I absolutely refuse. I told everyone that contacted me that I wouldn't kill anyone. I won't change my mind for a childhood friend who didn't care about me anyway. You told me my quirk was only meant to kill, and I refuse to let that be true. If you don't want my help, that sucks. But I'm not leaving until the job is done. I didn't come here for nothing. Katsuki felt fury as he glared at Izuku. This is not a fucking game, Deku. You don't get to pick choices in this. It's not about what me or you want. You seriously think he won't try to kill us as well? He doesn't give shit about morals. Katsuki kept yelling, and he smashed his fist on the table once again, ignoring the worried looks from other tables and the hushed whispers. This isn't about me bullying you when we were kids, got it? Whatever, don't fucking kill him. But you need to come up with a better plan, or otherwise we're all gonna die. Don't dirty your hand, fine. But every death will be on you, Deku. Izuku froze for a moment as he lowered his head again as he gritted his teeth. It's the best plan I have. I don't want to get my hands dirty, you're right. He looks back at Katsuki with a glare. There has to be a way to defeat him without having to kill him. But you just want to kill. I understand he doesn't deserve to live after all the lives he's taking. But that isn't our job, he snapped. Before he could say anything more, he looked over at the waitress who had walked over looking fairly nervous. I'm sorry, but can you please leave? I really am sorry, but you're causing a scene and scaring customers away, she said as she quickly bowed her head. Izuku sighed as he cooled his head. I'm really sorry, ma'am. I understand, he says as he stepped back and pushed the chair back into place as he reached into his pocket to get some money before laying it on the table. Let's go. We can talk about this elsewhere. Somewhere where you can yell at me all you want. he said as he headed for the door. He spotted Aizawa and Monoma walking towards the door, making Izuku smile nervously at them as he motioned them to turn around before he walked outside. "We got kicked out," he says, being fairly ashamed. Aizawa glared at Izuku before he quickly turned to Katsuki. "Of course they did. What did you do? We could have had a nice meal, but you both ruined it." Aizawa let out a sigh at Katsuki's response as he crossed his arms over his chest. "We can't make Deku kill him if he doesn't want to. I'm sure there is a way to get what everyone wants." He looks at Izuku with a slight glare. "But there aren't many options here. It is much easier and quicker to kill him. So you need to keep that option open, Deku. I understand you don't want to get your hands dirty, but it's also part of the job sometimes and nobody likes it." Izuku clenched his fists at his sides. He didn't say anything as he wasn't really sure what to even say. He wanted to say no, but he couldn't just say so. If he said no, he'd also be failing more at his job than he already was. "I won't slow you guys down. I'll kill him if I have to, but that's the last resort. If there is even a slight chance that I can keep him alive, then I'll do that, but I won't kill him if I don't have to. I'll be standing up front anyway, so if things do happen to get out of hand, I'll just need a second to touch him." He lifted his hand and looked at it. "But I'm going to put all my power into it, so the moment it's decided he'll be killed, I need everyone to get as far away as possible." "Didn't you have the same quirk as him? What do you mean putting power? You always just touch something, and that's it, isn't it?" Katsuki felt genuinely confused. Did somehow Deku's powers evolve? Izuku looked at Katsuki and nodded. "You're right. I do have the same quirk, but it evolved. I don't know how or really why. I didn't even know it could until it did. I can even activate my quirk just by touching with one finger if I really wanted to. Let's say if I touch the ground right now and use my quirk to the fullest, or the amount of damage I can do now, I can destroy the entire building and even a couple blocks. It took a while to control, but I'm still learning how to. If I use my power at its fullest, it might not give him time to regenerate, but it will cause quite a bit of damage, and I'll need people not to be touching the ground at least so nobody else gets killed." "That's actually good." Katsuki felt some relief. Deku could be actually useful if he wanted to. The problem was his attitude. "Are we going to eat something or what?" Katsuki asked, sighing. He felt tired after feeling so much anger. At least Eraserhead seemed to understand the importance of being willing to dirty his hands. "Well, you two idiots got us kicked out," Aizawa said as he turned to head back to his car. "We will just go down to the restaurant down the street," Aizawa said as he pointed the place. Izuku couldn't help but laugh a bit at how annoyed Aizawa must be at the fact that they got kicked out of the restaurant. Izuku glanced over at Katsuki before he headed over with the other heroes. He wanted to avoid talking about the subject for now. They had come to some kind of agreement, but there was still so much more to figure out. He just hoped that wouldn't cost them having to be kicked out again. Can't believe one a student Katsuki Bakugo can't keep himself from shouting in a restaurant. If you think about it, that's such a non-hero behavior. Monoma smirked, as Katsuki just clicked his tongue in annoyance, not willing to provide an answer to his teasing. "Oh, you're Izuku Midoriya, aren't you?" He offered his hand to the pro-hero. "Nice to meet you. I hope Bakugo didn't give our visit too much problems," which I'm guessing he did by the turn of the events. He laughed. "Shut your mouth, or I'm gonna shut it for you," Katsuki finally reacted. "Can we just keep some peace and quiet?" All Might asked. Katsuki had honestly forgotten he was here. "All right, but the fucker needs to stop." Katsuki pointed his finger towards Monoma. Izuku sighed. It seemed like it would be a long meeting. Izuku looked at Monoma and nodded as he looked down at his hand. "Yeah, that's me. It's nice to meet you too, Monoma Nito, right?" he says with a shy smile as he takes his hand to give it a small shake, being careful and pulling his hand away fairly fast. He could see why Katsuki seemed not to like this man, but he wouldn't say anything. He definitely had an interesting personality. He glanced over at Katsuki before looking over at All Might, the man he looked up to his entire life. He couldn't fail having him around. At least he hoped. "We should probably just calm down, Kachin," he says with a nervous smile. His eyes widened a bit when the old nickname slipped and covered his mouth as he looked away. "Sorry," he says before he began to walk a bit faster. He just wanted to disappear. He knew the other wasn't a huge fan of the nickname, and they weren't even friends anymore, so he shouldn't have said that. "Fuck off, Deku." Eventually, the time where the fight would start finally came. Izuku was fairly nervous as he took a deep breath before he pulled the hood over his head and the mask up. He quickly and quietly ran up the stairs to get in position, while Katsuki and Monoma created a distraction. He stood by the door as he looked through the small window and spotted Shigaraki. He felt a shiver run down his spine when he saw him and leaned back against the wall. "Okay, everyone in position," he spoke quietly as he laid a hand over the earpiece in his ear. He was ready for anything and everything that could happen, and knew what he had to do if push came to shove. Once he got the all clear, he stayed put for a few moments as he waited to hear an explosion. Aizawa come up next to Izuku and laid a hand on his shoulder. "You young kids are pretty energetic," he says with a sigh. "Okay. The moment you break into that door, I'll use my quirk, so don't get in the way. Be fast, remember," he says as he prepares himself to use his quirk. He was much less nervous than he probably should have been, but he didn't see anything wrong with their plans. Bakugo laid on the ground, his eyes wide open and lifeless. He had died after fighting Shigaraki with all his strength. However, it hadn't been enough to save himself from death. The fight was over. They had captured Shigaraki successfully, and Izuku kneeled on the ground, staring at Bakugo's unmoving face. There was suddenly nothing. Katsuki just saw pitch black, and he couldn't feel anything but his own thoughts. What happened? Was he dreaming? "Katsuki Bakugo, you lived 18 years. Yet in all these years, you never truly experienced love. You never expressed love towards anyone, not even your own mother. You were incapable of affection." Katsuki heard this, yet he didn't hear a voice. It was as if he were reading a book. "It's strange, I would actually give you a second chance to live. Yet I am going to offer you exactly that." Bakugo tried to speak, yet he couldn't. "To break the cycle and awaken from the night, you must find warmth in hearts, shine bright in your light. To escape this endless loop and see the dawn. Show love and kindness from dusk till dawn. Each day you'll relive till the lesson you learn. A heart filled with love, a soul that won't burn. In words and deeds, let kindness flow. Only then will you break this sorrowful show. Embrace the love, let go of the strife, or forever be bound in this repetitive life. Make the most of it." What did that even mean? However, before he could even attempt to ask, Bakugo opened his eyes. He was in front of Aldera High School, standing in the entrance. He looked at himself and noticed he was wearing the uniform. He got shaking chills upon realizing there was no battlefield anywhere. No signs of Shigaraki nor Deku and the rest of the team. There was no pain as well. He remembered the words he heard in his dream. They didn't make any sense. His last memory besides that was the sharp pain he felt on his chest, and after that, it was all black. What had just happened? Did he just die and woke up to this? To the past? "Katsuki Bakugo," a voice echoed in his mind, the same voice from the darkness. "To break the cycle and awaken from the night." Bakugo stood still, the riddle replaying in his mind. Show love and kindness from dusk till dawn. Was he remembering some poem he read at some point of his life for some reason? No, he wasn't. "It's strange, I would actually give you a second chance to live. Yet I am going to offer you exactly that." Did just some kind of entity revive him? Sent him back to his past? As he blinked and still stared at the school, he realized that he was right. This wasn't a dream. It was way too creative, too vivid. The riddle talked about showing love and kindness, as well as he got told he never showed love to anyone, not even his mother, which was something he couldn't deny. Izuku was walking to school as he held the straps of his backpack carefully. He hummed happily as he walked alongside the sidewalk. When he spotted his childhood friend from a distance, his eyes quickly lit up as he began to jog over to him. He knew they weren't on the best of terms, but he wouldn't give up on trying to be his friend. Kachin. He spoke cheerfully once he was close to him. He held his fists up to his chest as he looked up at Katsuki. His smile dropped seeing the look on the blonde's face, and he felt fairly worried. "Is everything okay, Kachin?" he asked as he reached to touch him. Katsuki stared at Izuku. This couldn't be true. This was a nightmare. Izuku, aged 16, was looking at him worriedly as he touched Katsuki's shoulder. His eyes were so hopeful, so unlike the Deku he had met again when they were both 18. He didn't seem to be scared of Katsuki either, so unlike his older self. He felt the sudden urge to ask what year it was, but he didn't want to make a fool of himself like that. This was proof he had done the impossible, something no quirk could ever achieve. He actually traveled in time. Feeling goosebumps in his arms, he realized he had been staring at Izuku for too long without answering. If Izuku wasn't afraid of him, then perhaps the bullying wasn't as harsh. Maybe Deku still thought they were friends. His eyes seemed too encouraging, and the fact that he dared to touch him was telling. Izuku tilted his head a bit as he moved his hand away. "What's wrong, Kachin? You're scaring me," he says as he couldn't help but feel more worried. He took a step back as he wondered if he was just bothering the other like he had mentioned before. "Am I in your way again? I'm sorry, you just have this look on your face and I'm worried. Maybe I should leave you alone," he said as he looked down at the floor and held onto his own arm. He didn't want to believe that all the mean things Katsuki had said to him before were true, but part of him was starting to think it was. Katsuki couldn't bring himself to speak, too shocked. The entity, God, or whatever thing that had brought him back talked about kindness. Does this mean that the purpose of this second chance at life was just for him to behave in a different way? That he would have to relive every single memory from where he was 16, just to make a positive change? What if he did the opposite? What would happen? Would he die? Deku, dive off a roof. Izuku quickly looked back at Katsuki after he heard his words. His eyes widened as he felt tears forming in his eyes. "Kakin, how could you say that?" He took another step back as he didn't want to believe what the older teen was saying. He didn't even know what else to say anymore and just stared at Katsuki. The tears ran down his cheeks before he began to run towards the school. So nothing happened besides Deku's reaction. Perhaps this wasn't so bad. He wouldn't be censored by some god, and he could just live again. As he was about to follow Deku, he felt an intense pain in his head. So fierce he was forced to knee as he put his hands on his hair, suddenly too dizzy to keep standing up. Then it was all dark once again. So he didn't die, but instead felt the most sharp headache he had ever experienced in his entire existence and woke up again in his bed. Everything was so strange. He was bound to be kind and to actually love someone, while the entity had put his mother as an example. It seemed like he had to play along the entity's wishes if he wanted to keep living. Was this a chance to fix his mistakes? If he was honest with himself, he wouldn't bother to pick on Deku again, not when the other teenager didn't really deserve it. He knew he had been cruel, and just like the entity had pointed out, unloving. There was actually no one who had had his affection, and therefore it would be safe to assume Katsuki hadn't had a very impactful existence on Earth. Hadn't changed anything for good. His life was only his academic success, and nothing else. His life had been empty and shallow. Katsuki felt something wet in his hands as he once again stared at the school in the same place as before. He was crying. How many years since he hadn't cried? He heard a familiar sound of footsteps, and by their pace, he knew Deku was close. He couldn't let him see Katsuki this way. He quickly wiped away the unexplainable tears. Deku blinked as he walked. He shook his head as he felt a bit dizzy, but it quickly went away. He simply just shrugged it off as he walked. He spotted Katsuki and smiles as he ran over to him. "Good morning, Kachin," he says. He noticed he seemed off and had wiped something off his face, but didn't question it. He didn't feel the need to, since there was probably a bug or something on his face. He did notice he was a bit odd, but he wasn't sure if he should ask. A hero would ask, right? "Are you okay, Kakin?" he asked curiously, as he tilted his head. "I'm all right." Katsuki avoided Izuku's eyes, as he remembered his own thoughts about apologizing, and how it would mean nothing, since simple words wouldn't be able to change the past actions. However, now he had a second chance. An actual opportunity to be what he himself deemed a good person. "Let's just get to class," he spoke, his heart racing fast upon realizing this time travel could make him fix himself all the things that had made his mother wonder out loud, when she thought Katsuki wasn't hearing about what she did wrong to have a son like him. He remembered Deku's tears. He didn't want to see any of that happening again. Not if that meant that his life would still be the same emptiness as always. A life with no meaning, a trash life. He could start over, and just not be so shitty as always. Izuku nodded, as he didn't want to push him to say what was wrong. "Okay, let's go," he said with a bright smile as he headed towards the school. He did find it a bit weird how Kakin's behavior had changed from yesterday, but he didn't question it as he knew that Katsuki was a good guy deep inside. He hummed happily as he headed to class, not really wanting to think anything negative. It was going to be a good day, or at least he'd try and make it a good day. "Did you have a good walk to school today?" Izuku asked as he turned to look at Katsuki. "It was nice." Katsuki didn't know what to say. He couldn't say what he was actually thinking about, that he had died and resuscitated just to live his life again in a fix-it way. He wondered what he would do with the knowledge of his death, besides not being a shitty person. Perhaps he should even cut ties with his friends, the ones who hadn't had any problems with treating Deku like an absolute piece of shit. "This school sucks ass," he wondered out loud. Izuku walks a bit ahead of him and walks backwards so he could face Katsuki. "It's a good school. It's nice being here, so don't say that, Kachin. Your friends are here, right?" he says with a bright smile. His smile quickly turned into one of fear when he felt his back hit someone. Sorry," he said as he quickly turned around. "Watch where you're going, dumbass," one of the boys said as he pushed Izuku, making him fall over. "Oh, Bakugo. What are you doing with this idiot?" Izuku quickly took his hands off the floor when his quirk activated for a moment, and he caused a few cracks where his hands used to be. He signed knowing he'd probably get into big trouble for it, even if it wasn't entirely his fault. "Why don't you actually fuck off? It's not as if your brain wasn't peanut-sized." Katsuki smirked and realized he felt no pain, because this guy probably deserved this lack of kindness. Good shit. He could be rude when it was needed. The boys stared at Bakugo in blatant surprise. "You're defending the nerd. What's up with you?" one of them asked, genuinely confused. "The whole time we picked on Deku was to feel better about ourselves." "Isn't that pathetic?" Katsuki asked them, his smile trembling. "You're the one who suggested we pick on him, so you're the pathetic one," the boy said. He looked down at Izuku and grabbed the collar of his uniform, forcing him to stand. "We had fun with this one because his quirk is like those of villains. Isn't that right, Midoriya?" Izuku looks at him fairly nervously as he held his hands up in defense. "Please put me down." He glanced over at Katsuki as if asking him for some kind of help. He always did his best to not let the words get to him, but being told he had a villain's quirk always hurt him. He didn't want to be a villain. He wanted to be a hero, and he would never give up on his dream. "Look," Why can't you just be some fucking decent human beings and just leave him alone? Otherwise, I'll blow you up. You gotta know you can't surpass me, so don't pretend like you're any better. Katsuki yelled as he rolled up his sleeves, ready to use his quirk on them. His quirk might be weird as fuck and super lethal, but that's his own problem. The boy let go of Izuku with a tisk sound. So annoying. I guess it was fun while it lasted. We're not running because we're scared or anything. You're just annoying. He walked past them both and bumped into Katsuki's shoulder. Izuku looked over at Katsuki. Is my quirk really that weird? He asked. He wasn't sure why, but when it came to Katsuki commenting on his quirk, it hurt a bit even if he meant no harm. He sighed as he shook his head, hoping he probably just said that to get them to back off. Never mind, thank you for helping me, Kachin. I owe you one, he says with a bright smile. For a moment, he was scared the other would cause chaos, but he believed deep inside he wouldn't. Or more like he hoped. Katsuki felt slightly guilty. Weird, in a sense that it's just a rare quirk. Jesus. Being nice to Deku felt strange. You know, I was just trying to make them agree and leave. He elevated his voice, feeling embarrassed at his poor attempt to make himself sound better. Whatever, Deku, I'm going to class. He turned around and walked towards the classroom, hearing Deku following him right away. You know, you could actually attempt to defend yourself so you won't look like a weakling, and they will actually feel less inclined to fight you. Katsuki clicked his tongue. He was truly doing this. Helping Deku out. Izuku followed behind Katsuki fairly quickly and listened to what he had to say. Defend myself, he thinks for a moment as he rubs his chin. But what if I try to push them away or something, and I touch them with all 5 of my fingers, and then they will? You know, he says with a sigh as he looks down at his hands. I wonder if there's something I can do to stop it, he says, mainly thinking out loud. I don't know how to fight either, so maybe I should start there instead, he says with another sigh, but then his face lit up. I'll be strong. I'll be the strongest hero one day. I'll be just as strong as you, Kakin. Katsuki stopped in his tracks and turned around. Look, Deku, you're right. You do need to learn how to fight. Just think about it. You don't even have to use your hands. You could kick them in the nuts or something, and that could also work, I guess. You just gotta put in some work into it. You say you will be as strong as me? Prove it, he smirked. I guess I could help you out, even though I always use my arms, he trailed off. He suddenly felt unsure. How was he supposed to help him if he didn't even know how to use his legs to fight? I will definitely prove it to you, Izuku says with a bright smile. He decided to forget all the mean things he had said to him before, since it seemed like he didn't really mean it. Probably just a prank he was pulling on him or something. Izuku punched the air as he hummed quietly. He had to learn how to use his legs. That wasn't a bad idea if he couldn't use his arms. Strong heroes never give up, he says. He was fairly excited to maybe become a hero alongside his childhood friend. He walked into class as he happily walked over to his assigned seat, as his mind wandered off like it normally did. He decided he'd look into heroes who used their legs to fight often, to hopefully make it easier to start. Katsuki observed Deku seemed significantly more cheerful. Make the most of it, he remembered the entity saying. That was exactly what he was doing. Izuku walked in the hallway, while he looked at the floor to try to ignore the massive amount of people hanging out next to the lockers. Look at Deku. The nerd still has the courage to come to school, even after all the rumors. Some guy pointed at Izuku, whose heart immediately started racing as he felt his palms sweat. Yeah, he is all cuddly with his faggot boyfriend, who stopped bullying him for some reason. Not only are they faggots, but their relationship is fucked up. More voices kept coming. They're acting all lovey-dovey by openly hanging out. I actually don't even know where they go. They probably go hide like the queers they are. They laughed. God, they're such a waste of space. For real. Oh, look, it's Deku on his own. They finally noticed Izuku, who was pretending to check stuff in his locker just to hear them talk. Izuku stiffened a bit when they mentioned he was alone. He glanced over at them before he looked back inside of his locker. How could someone say such awful things? He didn't care all that much what they said about him. He cared more because of what they had said about Katsuki. He sighed as he closed his locker. He lowered his head as he walked away from them. He felt tears form in his eyes before he quickly wiped them away. He didn't want to worry his friend. "He's just my friend," he said in almost a mumble as he walked. Izuku just hoped such rumors wouldn't reach Katsuki. He knew the other would likely lose his mind if he heard such rumors. He should have just made it easier for them and denied the rumors, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. He didn't really understand why. Maybe it was fear of things escalating. As Izuku walked to class, he went to another hallway. "Yo, Deku," Katsuki shouted as he appeared behind the wall, smirking upon seeing he had successfully scared him. "Oh shit, you look like someone just died." He observed Deku's startled face carefully. "The fuck happened?" Izuku flinched, letting out a sound of surprise. He looked at Katsuki and sighed in relief, being glad it was just him. "You scared me, Kaken." He turned his head away as he didn't want to tell him what they were saying. Would he stop being his friend? Would he start bullying him again? He forced a smile and looked at Katsuki. "Nothing happened. Everything is fine. Why would anything be wrong?" he says as he walks around him, to try and avoid the other seeing his face. Things were going so well, and he didn't want to risk their friendship over silly rumors. "What the fuck kind of answer is that? You're acting suspicious, Deku." Katsuki raised an eyebrow. What was he trying to hide? He couldn't even imagine what the nerd could try to hide. Unless he was thinking shit of Katsuki. That wouldn't really be strange, since after all, he had bullied him when they were kids. Just a sudden change of mind wouldn't erase the difference. Izuku sighed and glanced over at Katsuki. "I'm not acting suspicious, Kaken." He kept walking as he looked ahead. He held onto the straps of his backpack, being careful to not put all 5 fingers on it. He opened his mouth to say something, but he stopped himself. Izuku went back and forth in his mind on whether he should say it or not. Was it better if it came from him? Maybe. It was definitely better than him finding out by someone else. He looked around before he reached for Katsuki's sleeve and lightly pulled him to follow him into an empty classroom. "What the fuck? Why are you taking me to a secluded area? You're totally acting up, Deku, don't lie to me," he smirked. Deku had no acting skills. "Can you just calm down? I'll tell you, but I need you to promise me you won't do anything stupid," Izuku spoke as he kept his head lowered. He eventually looked up at Katsuki, just wanting to be sure that the other was being honest when he promised him. "No. Why would I promise anything?" "Shit, Deku, speak, or I'll blow you up." He laughed once again. He just couldn't take Deku seriously. Not when he was pleading for secrecy like he had the biggest secret ever. "Gonna make me a pinky promise?" "What, you got a crush?" He kept teasing him. He felt his cheeks ache from smiling for so long. Izuku let him go and sigh. "I'm being serious, Kaken," he said as he looked away from him. When he mentioned having a crush, he grew a light blush on his cheeks and took a step back from Katsuki. "No, that's not it. There's just some rumors going around. I just don't want you to have to hear it from someone else. You'd probably get mad at them if you did, and I think I'd rather you get mad at me than them because I at least wouldn't say anything," he says as he messes with his own uniform for a bit. "Spit it out, Deku," Katsuki said, way too confused. Why was Deku acting so mysterious? Why would he even bother being mad at him? It's not like he could. Anyways, with the whole riddle stuff, wait, would it actually stop him from expressing his anger? If he somewhat had a reason. Perhaps he would find out now. Izuku stayed quiet for a couple of moments. He wondered how to say it. He would definitely leave most of what they had set out. Mainly because he knew that Katsuki would likely only get more pissed off. There's rumors going around that said I guessed that. That you and I are together, like boyfriends. He says fairly quietly as he slowly looks back up at Katsuki. Katsuki was speechless. He couldn't say anything too mean to them out loud, could he? He had no desire to experience that headache again and wake up again and have Deku tell this twice. He was going to kill them anyway. The riddle said that he should show love and kindness, but it seemed to emphasize more on the talking aspect. Would it stop him from hurting someone with a good reason? And why did they have dating rumors anyways? That was so stupid. Him and Deku, a couple. He felt his cheeks burn as well as his neck. He pictured holding Deku's hand and felt immense embarrassment from his own thoughts, as he got more mental images of how it would be to date Deku. For fuck's sake, I'm going to kill them, he finally shouted, not being able to contain himself. Upon realizing what he just said, he covered his mouth and waited for the headache. Nothing happened. So the riddle didn't actually work sometimes. If he thought about it, when he had threatened to blow the bullies up, nothing had happened either. Did the riddle just allow him to cuss at people who technically deserved it? Izumi waited for Katsuki to say something, or maybe even run off and go find the people who said such things. He flinched when Katsuki shouted, and was ready to stop him if he had to. It's fine. It's not like it's true, so it shouldn't matter. He averted his eyes as he rubbed the back of his neck. He felt a small pain in his heart, but he decided to ignore it. Why would Katsuki see him that way? Of course he wouldn't. He shouldn't. He shook his head a bit to let the thought slide. Just please don't do anything stupid. It's fine. I can handle the rumors and deny them. I should have probably denied it earlier, but I panicked. I will next time, I promise. For fuck's sake, Deku. You don't get it. It's not about it being true or not. They called us faggots and more probably. They're no one to say shit like that, and denying it will only give them more power. I'm going to end them, that's it. He grinned wildly as his mouth trembled, as well as his heart raced fast, as well as his cheeks burned. These visions with Deku, they weren't that bad. Why was he even thinking that now? We need to assert dominance, Deku, by responding with an attack. Izuku sighed as he rubbed his arm, turning his head away. He didn't want to get Katsuki in trouble or himself. Does it really have to be a physical attack? It's not like they hurt me physically or you either. He looked back up at Katsuki and reached up to touch his face, seeing that his face was kinda red. But he stopped himself as he let his hand drop back down to his side. Hey, are you okay? You really don't have to be that mad about it. Maybe they did call us faggots, but really, it's not much of a big deal. It's easier to deny it than to get in trouble and have to apologize. Who cares, Deku? I'm not gonna give them the pleasure to deny it like a coward. Plus, you won't have to do anything. Just watch me. Katsuki speed walked towards the hallway. Kei can wait. Izuku quickly followed behind Katsuki. He reached to grab the back of his shirt, but held back, knowing he'd probably accidentally use his quirk on him. He wanted to stand in front of him to stop him, but Katsuki was still too fast for him still. Yo, are you the ones talking shit behind our backs? He pointed at the group of boys he used to hang out when he was actually in high school for the first time. He saw the scared looks on their faces and the way they seemed about to deny it, so he decided to not even give them the chance to. Don't even try to deny it. You picked the wrong person to mess with. Katsuki ran towards them as they tried to escape, but he was faster. He quickly slapped every single of them. Tell this to the teacher and you're done for. I will wait for you outside school if you do, and your parents will have to bury you. Katsuki smirked as he created small explosions from his hands. Fuck you, Katsuki, one of them yelled before running away. The rest of them, speechless, just followed him. Izuku just watched everything unfold. He couldn't say or do anything. He just kind of froze. The only thing that ran through his mind was you have a villain quirk. If he intervened, he would probably badly injure someone or even kill them. Once it was over, He snapped out of it and quickly walked over to Katsuki. Are you okay? He asked softly, as he kinda just looked him over quickly. You're asking me if I am okay? That's just ironic. Didn't you just see them beating their asses? He smiled, proud, as he pointed at himself. Why would Deku even bother to ask if he was fine? Sorry, it's a reaction to ask, Izuku says as he stepped back to give him some space. He probably should step back a bit just to not make him uncomfortable. After all, he wouldn't be surprised if he did find it uncomfortable after hearing about the rumors. Thank you. You really didn't have to do that, Kaken. Believe me, I had to. He stared at the direction where the boys ran off to. Bastards. He sighed. Anyways, let's just go to class. I know they won't tell this to no soul, unless they want to end up in a coffin. He cracked his fingers. Izuku nodded as he turned to head back towards the building. I guess I owe you one again, he said with a smile as he looked over at Katsuki. Katsuki was always doing nice things for him, but he never felt like he was returning the favor, even though he really wanted to. He headed back to class as he wondered what he could do for him. A couple weeks would go by and Izuku would often give Katsuki small gifts. He would also follow him around because he just liked to study him and how he'd practice his fighting. School was out, and Izuku walked over to the stairs. He had another gift for Kazuki. Izuku smiles happily as he looks down at the small gift in his hands. It was a simple key charm of All Might. The two looked up to All Might, so he was fairly excited to be able to give it to him. He just knew Katsuki would like it. Katsuki arrived to school, only to find the nerd in the stairs. What was he doing there? As he walked closer, he thought about how they had grown closer ever since Katsuki told him to learn how to defend himself, which wasn't needed anymore, since no one picked on Izuku. They knew Katsuki would get back at them. They used to hang out at school and eat lunch together, and if Katsuki was honest, he did like his company. He wished he would actually have given Deku a chance before. Deku waved at him, and he nodded. Why are you sitting on the stairs? He asked once he got close to him. Izuku looks up at Katsuki and smiles brightly at him as his eyes light up in excitement. Hey, Kaken. He stood as he held out the small box in his hands out to Katsuki. Look, I got you a gift, he says with a bright smile as he had a light blush on his cheeks. But he didn't pay too much attention to it. He just wanted to see Katsuki smile and be happy with his gift. A gift? Katsuki felt surprised, and as he opened the box, he found an All Might's key charm. Holy shit, Deku. This is good stuff. I actually didn't have any mercy of him like this. Katsuki allowed himself to smile softly. It felt strange to do it. He didn't smile in front of anyone, not in a way that wasn't some smirk. Not even his own mom saw him smile like this. He felt himself blush at the thought of Deku being the only one he trusted enough to do it. Thanks. He looked at Izuku as he kept the All Might keychain in his pocket. Seeing Katsuki's soft smile surprised Izuku. He felt like he was seeing things, but when he realized he wasn't, he felt happy. I'm glad you like it. No problem. I'm just happy you like it, he said before he turned and walked up the stairs. Let's get going, he said as he held his hands behind his back. He didn't want Katsuki to see the dumb smile on his face. Can't believe they're making us do some dumb model of the school of our dreams. Of course it's gonna be Yua. Katsuki talked as he waited for Deku to finish packing his stuff in his school bag. Classes were over, and they were paired up for a project. This is just going to steal our time for training, he sighed. School is so useless. This is a nasty place, with nasty people. Can't wait for us to enter Yua, he smirked. Deku wasn't going to the USA, not this time, since he probably never applied for the scholarship in that country. That would only mean that he would go to Yua. Shit, you're probably gonna kill it in the exam, he said, as he remembered it being about destroying robots. Destruction was easy for Deku. He wasn't supposed to know any of this, so he kept quiet about that part. He wasn't about to ruin everything and tell Deku some mad story about traveling in time, just to make him believe Katsuki had officially lost his mind. Izuku was fairly excited for the project. He liked the idea of making a model of the school of their dreams. He finished packing his things and slipped his backpack on. But this is so exciting. It's going to be fun, he says with a smile. Izuku was fairly confused on what Katsuki meant by what he said. Really? Why do you say that? He asked curiously. As far as he knew, they hadn't announced what their exam would be. He knew he'd probably get a good score on the written exam. He walked alongside Katsuki as he tried to think of all the things that could possibly be on the exam that made Katsuki say what he did. He just shrugged it off, believing he would give him some kind of explanation. Well, Katsuki paused. What was he even supposed to tell him instead? They're probably going to test the strength of our quirks and make us rescue in some way, I guessed. And your quirk is powerful. You know, Katsuki felt like such a hypocrite while saying this. He was the same person who bullied him when they were kids about his quirk being villainous. Izuku looks up at Katsuki when he explains. He nodded as he looked back ahead of him to see where he was walking. I suppose you're right about that. I wouldn't say powerful though. Yours is probably more powerful than mine is. It's not like I can control my quirk either, he says with a shrug. He really did see Katsuki as the most powerful student in their class, and maybe even in the whole generation, and no one could convince him otherwise. But you will get the hang of it at some point, Deku. You just gotta put some faith into it, you know? And about my quirk, yeah, I know it's hella powerful. He grinned. Look, maybe we could train together or something, he suggested. Yeah, I suppose you're right, Izuku says as he looked down at his hands. That's a great idea, Kaken, he says as he looked up at him. Well, let's not worry about that right now. We have a project to so remember. Let's focus on that first, he says as he wanted to start Yua with the best grades he could. Whose house should we make the model at? He asked. Katsuki imagined his mom making a huge deal of him finally inviting someone over. Yeah, no, that wasn't happening. Plus, chances were his mom would not only embarrass the shit out of him, but also hit him if he complained. Shit. He couldn't put Deku through watching that circus and make him worry. Yours, he said without providing any explanation. Izuku nodded. Okay, let's go. He didn't mind going home, though he tried to think back on that morning to try and remember if his room was clean. Once they had arrived at his apartment, Izuku opened the door and stepped inside. He held the door open to Katsuki as he slipped his shoes off. Do you want something to drink? He offered as he closed the door once Katsuki was inside. He felt a bit nervous knowing they'd probably be in his room, alone. He quickly shook the thought out of his head, remembering the rumors and how the others seemed to react. Yeah, I'm thirsty as hell, Katsuki replied as he looked around. The house was incredibly organized. It looked nothing like his own, who was always disheveled and a general mess, which no one wanted to clean until it was too much. Your house looks amazing, he decided to comment. It was strange, being so honest, but he was starting getting used to actually voice his positive thoughts out loud instead of hiding them. He felt he could actually kind of be more like his true self with Deku. How crazy was that? Ah, thanks. My mom always tries to keep it clean, so I guess it always looks nice, Izuku says as he walks deeper into the apartment heading for the kitchen. You can go to my room. I'll meet you there in a bit. It's down that hall, the last door to the left, he says as he motioned towards a hall. He grabbed 2 glasses as he set them down on the counter before opening the fridge. He assumed his mom was out working, or maybe running some errands. He should probably tell her they had a guest over. He poured water into the 2 glasses as he took his phone out to make the quick call to his mom. He looked in the fridge for some snacks they may have as he spoke to his mom. Once he was done, he slipped his phone back into his pocket and prepared small snacks for them. No shit, you're All Might's fan, Katsuki said as he watched all the All Might's figures and posters hanging in the room. I don't even have this amount of merchandise. He didn't even try to hide his amazement. To be honest, it wasn't like his parents bought him anything anyways. There were always excuses or a plain no. Katsuki just wasn't allowed. Trying to ignore the bitterness, he decided to switch the subject. We should get this done right now, as quickly as possible. He smiled as he took the water cup Deku offered him, and drank all it in one go. Izuku went to his room once he was done, and set the stuff down on his desk. He picked up the glass of water and handed it over to him. I guess I went a bit overboard with the All Might stuff, but he's so amazing I can't help myself. He watched as Katsuki drank the water in one go and smiled nervously. We don't have to rush. If we rush, we might mess up, and we'll have either a bad model or just a bad grade, he says as he walks over to get what they needed. He set the stuff down on the coffee table before he sat down. Let's just get started. It should be fairly easy, right? He said as he looked up at Katsuki. God damn it, Deku, you're right. This should be easy. He unpacked all the stuff they got from the groceries they had bought for the project. For fuck's sake, why it doesn't stay glued? Katsuki was mad because the apartment he was building kept falling off. Good lord, Deku, you say it could be easy, he further complained. Izuku stayed quiet as they worked on the project, mainly because he was focused on trying to make it perfect. He was working on small details from the main building. He looks over at Katsuki and chuckles as he crawls over to him. Are you holding it in place so it dries a bit? He asked as he tried to put it back together. After letting it dry for a couple moments, he slowly let go and looked back at Katsuki. See? Just have to be a little patient, he said with a nervous smile, knowing he probably shouldn't have told him to be patient, but it slipped. Don't patronize me, Deku, Katsuki replied back, but without any venom to it. He watched Deku's building actually stay up, amazed. Well, if this shit actually stays glued, it's gonna look mad good. Katsuki smirked. We're gonna teach these losers we are definitely the ones going to UA. I bet they will be too embarrassed to even say they want to go there. One of them even had a calorie quirk, and he was one of the people who spread shitty rumors about us. Can you imagine having such a loser quirk and having the guts to bully you? He grinned. He might be a hypocrite, but at least he wasn't a bully anymore. He should probably apologize anyways, as if that would erase any of the damage. He has been a dumb kid, quite a cruel one. Izuku shrugs. I guess so, but I wouldn't call it a loser quirk. I think everyone's quirk is special in their own way, he said in a soft tone as he looked down at the table. He remembers being told he had a loser quirk and having a villain quirk, but he didn't think either was true. Well, at least he tried not to get it in his head, but he would be lying if he said it didn't bother him. He lets out a sigh and looks back at the project. You're a good friend, Kaken, he said fairly randomly, before he crawled back over to his spot. He knew they had a fairly rough start, but he was happy they could grow close. He didn't have many friends to begin with because of his quirk, so in a way he considered Katsuki his best friend. Though part of him was also just denying what he was truly feeling and thinking. Am I? It seems like you're forgetting I did bully you when we were kids, Katsuki pointed out, as his heart stammered in his chest. He didn't know what he was trying to gain by saying it out loud, besides making it clear he wasn't pretending to be no saint. I haven't been truly a good friend for no one, to be honest. I've let my ego dictate me. For some reason, he couldn't straight up say the words. I apologize. Why was it so hard? Izuku stiffened a bit, hearing what Katsuki had to say. He couldn't deny it, but he had changed, so, in his mind, he was now a good friend. Even if his words were from the past, they still hurt him. He looked over at Katsuki before he averted his eyes. I guess so. But you changed a little, so I think you're a good friend now, even if you were mean to me before. He spoke in a bit of a hurtful tone, even if he didn't mean to. He didn't want Katsuki to know that he was still hurt by the bullying. He wanted to show him he was over it. But for some reason he couldn't make it sound that way. I guess. An awkward silence took over, as they both continued the model. I'll make it up to you, Deku. He promised, without really knowing what he was saying. Because how could he erase the past by himself? Izuku looked back over at Katsuki, not saying anything. He stayed quiet as he went back to working on his part of the project. Okay, Kaken, he said quietly, as he didn't look over at the other. He couldn't say no. It would be best for them both if some kind of apology was said. He didn't need anything. He'd be fairly happy with a simple apology. But for the time being, he didn't mind just forgetting about it. This shit is over. We just need to paint it, Katsuki said. Holy cow, I forgot to buy the stuff to paint it. You got any paint? He asked as he glanced over to Izuku, as he mentally congratulated himself for being able to avoid the awkward silence by smartly changing topics. He was so smart. I think I have paint around here somewhere, Izuku said as he stood and walked over to his desk. He scanned over it before he walked over to his closet. He opened it and crouched down as he looked through a few boxes he had laying on the floor. Here they are, he said, as he picked up one of the boxes and opened it. He closed it before he stood back up and walked back over, laying the box on the table. He looks down at his uniform. Maybe we should change just in case we get our uniforms dirty, he says as he walks back over to his closet. But would any of his shirts fit Katsuki? He wasn't sure. I don't really care if my uniform gets shitty, Deku. It's fine, he grinned, as he imagined the angry look on his mother's face and the disappointed classic sigh from Dad. He didn't mind bothering them, not at all, and he couldn't explain to himself why, since he didn't really get any benefits from it, besides the satisfaction of knowing he was annoying. If you're sure, okay, I'll be back. If you change your mind, then just grab one of my shirts, Izuku said as he grabbed one of his shirts. He walked out his room, closing the door behind him. He sighed as he headed for the bathroom to change. He should be used to changing around other guys, but it felt embarrassing changing in front of Katsuki. He changed fairly quickly before he headed back to his room. He opened the door and stepped inside before closing it behind him. Sorry if I took a while. You took so long, I nearly finished painting this thing, Katsuki laughed. Izuku observed he had barely got one apartment complex painted, so he realized he was being sarcastic. Izuku smiles warmly and sets his uniform shirt on his desk. Let me make up for lost time. He sits back down where he was sitting before. He began to help Katsuki paint the main building. He hummed quietly just so the room wouldn't really be completely quiet. It's not like he minded the quiet, since it wasn't awkward or anything. After an hour, they had finished the model, and they left it drying on top of Izuku's All Might-themed desk. Well, what now, Deku? He decided to answer his own question. Should I leave or something? He stared at Deku, crossing his arms over his chest, trying to hide the embarrassment he felt from his own words. Izuku looks at the model, being fairly proud that they managed to do a good job. He turned his attention back to Katsuki and shook his head. You don't have to leave yet if you don't want to. We can watch a movie or play video games, he suggested. Oh, we can do some training too. You know, I think you should enter some jiu-jitsu course, so you can train your legs in case you can't use your hands due to your quirk. I know a gym. We could go later, he suggested. But first thing, I need to beat you in Super Smash Bros., he smiled, remembering the times from their childhood where they hung out at Deku's house to play that game. Jiu-jitsu HM, Izuku mumbles as he lays a hand on his chin. It was definitely a good idea he'd look more into. If he wanted to be a hero, he couldn't just rely on his quirk, as it could be dangerous if he did a wrong move. Okay, let's play, he says with a bright smile. He would worry more about it later. Izuku walked towards the door and opened it as he stepped out. He led the way to the living room and turned the console on as he picked up the controllers. He handed one over to Katsuki before he went to sit down on the couch and picked up the remote to turn the TV on. That day, Katsuki remembered what it felt like to have a friend by his side. The past you've known, rewind and see. A friend's fate, on the line it be. Beware the metal's crushing might. In shadows, danger hides from sight. Katsuki woke up. The entity that had sent him back to the past had sent him a new message in his sleep. And he somehow remembered every single word. And yet, they made no sense for him. He got up and looked for a notebook, where he wrote the riddle. A friend's fate? He had no friends. This surely was meant for Deku, since he was the only human being he spoke to. He actually refused to talk to his parents, even if the riddle told him to show them love. That was just some bullshit. As he had tested, the riddle could only force him to repeat a day, as if he were in an eternal cycle, if Katsuki acted in a way that wasn't kind or loving at all. Which was always, by the way. But he somehow hadn't experienced it since he told Deku to kill himself just to test it out. Going to the past was a crazy experience. Everything was so different in school because of his own actions. He didn't have a gang anymore, and he solely hung out with Deku. The people he used to hang out with before were losers, he admitted to himself. It was better this way. Somehow he didn't mind the fact that he had to do every single thing again, every project, every day. It was as if someone had gave him a holiday from Shigaraki. He sighed and read the riddle again. Beware the metal's crushing might. What the fuck was that supposed to mean? Danger hides from sight. Alright, so the riddle was about Deku, saying his life would be on the line, and it also spoke about a danger. Could the riddle actually be talking about Deku's life, being endangered by being crushed by some kind of metal? Whatever god or entity that had given him this second chance must really enjoy messing with him. Katsuki blinked at Izuku. He hadn't listened to any of the words his friend was telling him. Too busy still thinking about the riddle. What were you saying? He asked calmly. They were outside of US training grounds, waiting for the practical exam to begin. Izuku tilted his head, a bit, seeing that Katsuki didn't seem to have been paying attention to anything he was saying. He scratched the back of his head as he shook his head. Nothing important. Just excited for the exam is all. But also fairly nervous. You must be nervous too, Kaken. You've been acting pretty weird all morning. He pointed out. He really just believed the other was nervous for the exam and nothing more. You'll do great. You're super strong. You'll defeat these robots easily, he says as he holds his fists up to his chest. Deku, do you realize you're going to obliterate these robots in a matter of seconds as well? Of course I'll be the best, but realistically, you should do a lot of damage as well, he grinned. We will be ranked the top. These losers won't expect it, he shouted, and then realized every single one of these competitors were staring at them. Izuku couldn't help but blush a bit in embarrassment, seeing that everyone was looking in their direction. He quickly looks up at Katsuki. Please calm down, he says with a nervous smile. He didn't want to make any kind of enemies before they could even start at UA. He quickly looked at everyone else as he spoke. I'm sure we will all do great. No one is a loser. He quickly spoke, trying to at least try and fix any damage that could have been done. What an obnoxious guy, some boy commented out loud, only for people to whisper in agreement. Katsuki was unfazed by the negativity. You will see who will be at the top. Extras, he continued. It was fun to see them get riled up. Izuku lowered his head quickly, just giving up. He knew once Katsuki got like this, there was little to nothing he could do to stop him. A girl who he had met earlier walked up to him with a smile. He's very hyped up, huh? Izuku looks at her and smiles back at her. Yeah, I'm sorry about him. He isn't great with words, but he means well. He averted his eyes as he thought to himself. Well, sometimes at least. Don't speak like I ain't here, nerd, Katsuki shouted. I always mean well, of course. He raised a fist in the air dramatically. Who in here dares to say otherwise? He looked around, seeing some people backing up, while others weren't impressed. Sorry, Kaken. Izuku looks back over at Katsuki. He was definitely leaving some kind of reputation. Before they knew it, the exam had started, and everyone began to run into the training center. Izuku ran as well as he looked around. He also stayed fairly close to Katsuki, just so they could work together if it was needed. Go somewhere else, Deku. These robots are mine. He grinned as he ran and exploded the robots in front of him, without leaving others a chance to react. He felt a slight headache. Oh no, not now? He wasn't even mean. He just wanted the robots for himself. He realized nothing happened. Was that some kind of warning? This was starting to feel like he was some kind of slave to the entity. He decided to ignore it. He was being strategic. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle as he wasn't surprised. Be careful, Kaken, he shouted as he ran off ahead. He looked around as he ran. As he ran, he would touch a few of the smaller robots to destroy them. He wanted to avoid any major damage, just to avoid anyone getting badly hurt. Izuku stopped when he felt the ground under him tremble. He panted as he looked around to see what was going on. That's when he spotted the machine. It was much bigger than the ones before. He had caused some damage already, and Izuku saw that a few people were down. He spotted the girl from earlier, and then looked up at the machine. He wasn't sure what to do. Was there a way to destroy it without anyone getting hurt? He had never destroyed anything this big. Without thinking much anymore, he ran towards the machine at full speed and jumped to touch its body. He tried to use as much power as he could to destroy it. He landed on the ground and his eyes widened as he watched the machine crumble and come down towards him. The machine's torso was about to fall on top of Izuku, since his quirk was slowly turning the machine to ashes, but not fast enough to prevent its fall on Izuku. He was about to use his quirk on the machine's torso as he was preparing himself to be crushed. But then, he felt a kick on the ribs that pushed him away from the machine's grasp. Get out of the way, nerd! A familiar voice yelled. Izuku laid on the ground for a second. It was full of dust, and he couldn't really see anything. However, as he stood up and worriedly looked for Katsuki, he found him standing with his hands in his hips, triumphant. We blew that thing away, Katsuki grinned, but suddenly, his smile fell. Shit, Deku, how many points was this robot? Katsuki remembered the huge 0 mark in the machine and covered his eyes, terribly frustrated. This didn't guarantee us any points. Let's hurry up. Izuku stared at Katsuki for a couple of moments. He didn't say anything and just stayed quiet. He was more worried than shocked, but was fairly relieved to see that he was okay. Right? He would keep in mind to thank him later. He had froze earlier and felt a bit bad that Katsuki had to save him again. Oh, hey, are you okay? He quickly went over to Uraraka. Uraraka dusted herself off as she looked at Izuku and nodded. I'm fine now, thank you. That was really dangerous. Are you okay? She asked, a bit worried. Izuku nodded with a smile, being relieved that everyone seemed to be okay. Yeah, I'm fine, don't worry. Just a few scratches, but nothing serious. He wondered how much time they had left. They had taken down quite a few, so he wasn't too worried about just having 0 points. It's not the time to worry, we've got to. Before Katsuki could finish, an alarm rang. The exam was over.